Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about my day 3 update for my Scourge or Caustic Arrow Poison Ballista build. Alright, so ever since my day 1 update, I have improved a lot of things. By now, I have also killed everything up to the Feared, including Maven. So I have all my favorite slots, I have all my Watchstones, and 115 completion. And as I said when we started this journey, this league, I don't really know where it's going because I couldn't test out the new gems. Now I feel like I have a very good understanding of where this build stands, where its strengths lie, and also the whole debacle, or the whole discussion, I should say, between Caustic Arrow and Scourge Arrow. And it kind of comes down to Caustic Arrow just being really good at bossing. I really underestimated how much the new quality with the plus 0.2 meter radius gave to Caustic Arrow. I thought maybe it wasn't even possible to shotgun 9 projectiles, but I've seen people who actually are shotgunning 10 and 11. So the single target damage is absolutely out of this world. And it is something that I also used against bosses. However, when it comes to the farming I did to get my currency, to get all of these items, I did Expedition and Legion, and those I did with Scourge Arrow because it is so much better at clearing. Caustic Arrow can pinpoint onto enemies, but it cannot have the screen-wide AoE that Scourge Arrow of Menace has. So before we get into the progression and into what I upgraded, I want to quickly talk about this right here. My opinion after playing with both up to that level is you should get both Scourge Arrow of Menace and Caustic Arrow of Poison. Both of these gems serve their purpose. Scourge Arrow of Menace, really good for clear, and Caustic Arrow of Poison, really good for bossing. And both have basically exactly the same tree, except for one thing, and that is that the Caustic Arrow of Poison has 40% chance to poison in build, which Scourge Arrow of Menace does not have. What that means, though, is you're just gonna cap as if you were a Scourge Arrow build. Scourge Arrow needs the 40% chance to poison. Sure, you're not gonna make use of this, but Caustic Arrow of Poison still gives you a ton of flat damage extra and extra AoE. And I would swap Caustic Arrow Greater Volley in whenever you don't need the clear. So if you're doing mapping, in my opinion, it's just Scourge Arrow plus GMP, and then whenever you're not, it is Caustic Arrow plus Greater Volley. Greater Volley is important here because you want to hone in on those enemies and get those overlaps. To be clear, this is not needed against normal map bosses or anything like that. This is if you're going into a Pinnacle encounter, you're going to have the time to swap, right? You don't have to do anything annoying. If you go into an invitation, if you go into a Pinnacle boss, or even just a normal boss that you feel like you're going to need the extra damage for. It's also just incredible against enemies who move because it is basically an instant hit, whereas Scourge Arrow, they can move out of the pod's way. So yeah, my opinion, definitely get both and sub them in whenever you need. One last thing I want to discuss is your 6-link. People were talking about returning projectiles, and I cannot play with it. I'm gonna be completely honest. I just cannot. My game just completely, like, it crashed, it lagged. This league's performance has been so bad, I had to cut it. As well as that, one of the things that Deadly Ailments does actually is it gives you 80% less damage with hits, which is only for initial hits. The dot does not get reduced in any way, shape, or form. But the hit portion actually matters because it kind of screws your totems against Reflect. So even though you don't have much hit damage, against Reflect, they die really quickly. With Deadly Ailments, I can run both Fizz Reflect and Ellie Reflect super easy. And I'll be honest, I never felt like I needed Returning Proj for the clear either. So I would highly recommend you actually go for Deadly Ailments in the 6-link. Now, if Returning Proj does nothing to your FPS, you can decide, right? You can try it out. But just note that if you do that, Caustic Arrow does not work with Returning Proj, so you will have to gem swap 3 things. You will have to gem swap Deadly Ailments against Returning Proj on single target as well. And then let's talk about damage. Damage is an important thing to do. On a poison build, you have so many scaling vectors that it's sometimes even hard to know where you go for first, and people still find a way to not have any damage. And that is because it can be confusing, right? Some of the things that are normal for me might not be for you. So there's a lot of very obvious things that you could be doing wrong, and around about 70 to 80% of all the POBs that I'm looking at have one of these just obvious mistakes. Check if you have a 100% chance to poison. In order to do that, you go to your main skill, you scroll down, chance to poison from main hand hits. For me, it's 100%. It could even be more. Doesn't matter if it's more, it doesn't do anything. Make sure if you're, for example, missing poison. So one of the things that I did until I had a bow with chance to poison, which isn't that necessary. The most important thing is that you have a lot of flat damage there. But if you have the chance to poison here, you're good with something like this. You're going to be fine, right? But otherwise, as I said, there are 2 claw nodes here, which are global chance to poison. They also count for your bows. So you can fill in 20% extra here, and you can also fit in 10% here with that small node. The second thing you should check is if you have a 100% chance to hit. You go right here, and you go to your main skill again. Now, on the very top, main chance to hit, 100%. The second one, not that important. If you have it on 100, that's fine, but it usually means that you have actually a little bit too much. It's still fine being overcapped, for example, against Enfeeble and stuff like that, but this number is what counts. Make sure your tincture is activated. As dumb as it sounds, I've had this before, that I didn't toggle on my flask. This is how it looks if it's not toggled. This is how it looks when it's toggled. Make sure you rebind this to a key you're never ever going to press. For me, it's F7, which I know I'm never going to press. And yeah, that way it's toggled. It's never untoggled if you log out or anything like that. It just stays on. You will literally deal 90% less damage or something if you don't have this on. So make sure it's on. After that, what I see as well a lot is people are like, I always die in red maps and I have no damage in red maps, and they're like level 80. My man, you have no business being in red maps at level 80 unless you know what you're doing. If you know what you're doing, sure. But you should just be getting levels and just, I don't know, farm up content that you can do. Every level counts, and every level is extra damage, extra defenses. You get life per level passively. In terms of damage, the difference between a level 80 and a level 85 character can be just like upgrading from a 5 to a 6 link. So just understand that and get your XP in. And then swapping Caustic against bosses. Obviously, early, if you don't have good gear, you're gonna feel the weight of not having enough single target damage on Scourge of Menace, which is why it's so important to have both gems and then swap in the Caustic of Poison. Those are obvious, but what is everything else that gives you extra damage? First up, you need to upgrade your bow. I already showed that in the last episode. Check that out. But you need to upgrade your bow. I see people with absolutely ridiculously bad bows. I know back in the day it was really hard to get an upgrade, but it really isn't, because most people are not looking for certain bows. Like this one, a lightning arrow build would also look for, but they don't need the chance to poison, so you kind of get that for free. If there's chaos damage on there, physical mixed with elemental, that means nothing to most bow players, but to you, it's the same as if it had triple elemental. Now, do note that if you have a lot of rolls like elemental damage with attacks, which does count for your poison, by the way, with this tincture, if you have a lot of those, then yes, it does matter that you have elemental damage here, but that is for very, very late. Just look that you have as much DPS as possible. If you can, download Awakened PoE trade, and then if you control D on it, actually, let me activate that real quick. If you control D here, it will actually show you how much DPS your bow has. But yeah, that is super important. Upgrade your quiver Ami for dot multi. Dot multi is super important, especially because you're probably not going to have it on your jewels yet. So both the amulet and the quiver are big slots for damage over time multiplier. This one is with attacks. This one is just global. These will give you a ton of damage. And if you happen to get a bow that already has increased attack speed on it, you can actually craft damage over time multiplier. It is a veiled mod that you can unveil. Physical and chaos damage over time multiplier. Then get elemental damage with attacks from various sources. So that could mean flat damage right here. Very nice on quiver. You can craft these. It can get a lot of just straight up lightning, fire, cold damage. Even physical damage doesn't really matter. You can get elemental damage with attacks. Your belt is the easiest slot to get it on. You can also craft it on if you have an open prefix. In general, that is huge. Also, the elemental damage from your Wilmas counts as well. Obviously, get a 6 link. Now, you can either get a corrupted 6 link. I actually have a video on how to get an easy 6 link. I will link it down below in the description. But in general, just any body armor that you really need, and then you slam on essences or whatever. You can even chaos spam. Probably shouldn't though. But yeah, if you want to go super cheap, you can also buy a corrupted 6 link. As I said, check the video out. And I say this because the price of 6 links falls off like a brick in the first few days. First day, you're like, I cannot afford this. And third day, you maybe don't even look when it's already at like 10 or 20 chaos. Then obviously get your uniques and your cluster jewels and also get your second curse. Azanov's doesn't really do anything if you don't have your second curse, because the temporal chains isn't really there, and or you can't cast your despair, so it's not really that big of an increase. Just so you know, the corruption here does nothing. You don't need to get double temporal chains. It doesn't do anything. But do note that if you get a corruption with either cast speed or attack speed, that both works for Wilmas for attack speed. So that's really nice, and they're pretty common. So yeah, Explodey is going to be nice. Set up your Wilmas. The most important thing, and that I've seen The mistake that I've seen people do is they don't upgrade their cluster jewels before. Now, this cluster jewel is completely whatever. I already explained how you craft these cluster jewels in my latest video. I just want you to know that I would upgrade those before I get a Wilma's, simply because you want Sleepless Sentries so your Onslaught is always up. Sure, you have Onslaught on kill to double dip with Wilma's, but against bosses where it really matters and where you're probably going to feel the most pain, it's not going to be up. With this, always up. Now, let's talk about what I upgraded though. First up, I now have a 1050-60 PS bow with chance to poison and attack speed. I actually should really reroll that attack speed. It should be 13%. So it would be around about 1100. I'm probably going to do one more push of upgrading a bow. I'll probably buy a T1 Fractured Thicket bow or something and just craft it from there. Maybe Essence Spam could be fun. Or maybe if I find a good deal, I buy one for 4 or 5 divines later. However, once you get to like 1000 DPS, you're already pretty damn good. As for Wilma's, I'm not really going to go hunt for any corruptions or anything like that. I think I'm going to stick with this. Roll is pretty decent as well. I got a new amulet. So important for your amulet slot, right? You want the +1 curse. What I used before is I got a Dodris Damning. Doesn't matter if you have a good corruption or not, but just a Dodris Damning instead of one of your rings to get that additional curse. And then you really want to get a good amulet as soon as possible, because the Anoint costs you 3 golden oils, which as of this recording is 1 divine in total. You don't want to spend 1 divine on a shitty amulet, right? So you want to get a good amulet to put that Anoint on. And I got that. I bought this amulet for 2 divines. It has damage over time multi. It has flat lightning. Doesn't matter. Lightning, fire, cold. Very strong. Energy shield is useless. But then also life, fire res, chaos res. I am actually almost chaos res capped, and with catalysts, I would be. Now, one really cool tech item if you want a strong amulet that can be quite cheap, but is worth it to anoint with Whispers of Doom, is actually Eternal Struggle. Eternal Struggle has a ton of stats, which, as you will have noticed, int and strength is very important for the build, and you're permanently starved. And then this amulet comes with 2 implicits. So one is going to be an Eater of World implicit, so the ones that you could get on gloves, helmet, or I think even body armor. Yeah, body armor or boots. And then you also get 1 Searing Exarch. And depending on which one has a higher tier, you either get Critical Strikes Inflict Malignant Madness or Killing Enemies. So basically a 15% cull. And you definitely want that 15% cull. So if you buy one of these, 2 things matter. The strength roll, the int roll, global defenses, dex don't really matter. Up here, if you can get something like Duration of Ailments, if you get chaos damage, if you get attack speed, if you get Aura Effect is like, okay, usually too expensive. Those are all fine. Movement speed, right? Cool. But make sure that your Searing Exarch mod is actually higher than your other mod. So for example, I made an oopsie here. I bought this one earlier because I thought, ooh, this is going to be good. Duration of Ailments, movement speed. I forgot that Duration of Ailments is actually a Eater of Worlds mod, and this one is higher. So if you look right here, in small in gray, it says Searing Exarch implicit modifier lesser. Now lesser is the lowest tier, and then down below at Eater of Worlds it says grand. So yeah, you can look at it here, you can look at it on Craft of Exile, but make sure that you have that. I say this because these amulets can run around from like 10 to 30 chaos, and you can get a good one. An amulet like this will probably run you at least 1 to 5 divines. So if you want a better solution for that, take Eternal Struggle, and don't forget that you can also catalyze them for even more attributes. Now, my quiver, I think, is still the same. I'm pretty sure I didn't upgrade that since last time. Basically, you want a lot of proc speed because of Scourge Arrow of Menace. Dot multi, super important. Life roll is obviously important, and then just flat damage, whatever you can. As for my rings, I still have this not very good ring, only like tier 5 life or something, but it does give me strength and int, so I still kept it. I bought this one on day 1, and this one I bought just recently for 1.5 divines, an absolute steal. Now, what I want you to remember is with Wilma's, it doesn't matter if you scale attack or cast speed, both get converted. So a cast speed roll on rings can go up to 16%, whereas an attack speed roll can only go to 7. So definitely look out for cast speed. And the good thing is, if you have combinations like attack damage and then cast speed, every build that doesn't run Wilma's will not want that and will maybe undervalue it. My chest is still the same, and I'm still not 100% sure what I want to do about it. Do I want to craft a better rare, or do I want to go for something like a lightning coil? Not 100% sure. Maybe even, yeah, it's still up in the air. probably talk about that in the next update if I upgrade it. And then I bought a better belt. So this is a flask belt with increased flask charges gained. I actually made this one with ROG, and if you ever want to try, making flask belts with ROG is very, very nice. Either a heavy belt or a leather belt is usually the base you want to go for. Now, in a perfect world, I would have flask charges gained, and then I think you can't get flask effect duration on top, but you could get reduced flask charges used on top. That would be the GG, but those are like incredibly expensive. Just make sure you have a lot of life and some resistances. And speaking of resistances, I actually made it so I am resistance capped without needing the Magi. So if you guys remember, the first Magi node right here gave us 50% all res if we don't have sockets in our helmet, and I redid that so I can get my 30% movement speed back instead. So now I'm getting the 30% movement speed and the 25% max life. And this is something that you have to play around with. Do you need extra life and survivability? Do you have shitty gear so you need the res? Do you feel slow so you need the movement speed? If you don't have the damage to back off your movement speed, you can be as fast as you want. Your ballistas will still not have killed stuff, so you would rather have defenses so you don't die, for example. But in endgame, you want that movement speed back. Now, as for Tincture, one thing that I really want to hammer home about is that grasping vines on hit are fantastic. These just absolutely slow enemies in their track, especially with temporal chains. There is a slow cap. You can't get them to 0%, but they are just crawling. And you will see that especially with certain bosses. Some bosses can't be slowed, but most of them can. Now, last time the phasing on kill was actually bugged on Poisonberry Tincture, and I think that has been reverted. I haven't tried it myself, but people in my chat said that it now works. So that is also a very good mod to have, because then you do not need the 10% chance right here. Ever since we last spoke, I also implemented the Bismuth Flask finally, and I want to eventually change this into a Taste of Hate. I just haven't gotten around to it quite yet. That is definitely something I'm gonna look forward to next. Obviously, if you had a Progenesis, then you would use a Progenesis, but right now it's way too expensive. And then I also got a GG Life Flask, which would look something like this. Obviously, you can get the quality up to 30%. That would be even better. You want amount recovered, reduced recovery rate. The reduced recovery rate just means that you don't get as much burst of a Life Flask, but that also means that your Life Flask is slower, which means you don't have to press it as often. It doesn't mean that you lose any life total recovered. Just makes it a little bit slower, which is good. Amount recovered, just awesome for your region. And then you want the immunity to bleeding and immunity to corrupted blood. I will say the range goes from 6 to 16 seconds. You don't want something too low. I think 13 seconds is totally fine, but 6 or 7 seconds is maybe a little bit too low. Now, as for the passive tree, I got some new tech in here. So as you guys know, usually you would have to path here and get the additional projectile, here. I was able to spec out of all of these nodes because of a Thread of Hope. You need a large radius right here. These are like 2 to 3 divines right now. So don't do it anytime soon unless you can afford it. That is a upgrade for later. This one reduces your LE res, but you can now allocate everything here. So you're going to allocate 1 with nature from 1 point. Primeval Force. All this LE damage with attacks works with your LE damage from your bow that can then poison. You get this +1 proj without having to path through these shitty nodes. Same thing here with multi-shot. And then we also take Aspect of Eagle, just a very good node, right? You can also take stuff like Perfectionist, a little bit of movement speed, chance to avoid. And if you're a Caustic Arrow only, you can think about taking that 1 point piercing shots. Now, another thing I got was one of these new jewels. If you guys don't know, that which was taken is one of the new boss rewards from the final boss, no spoilerinos, from the League mechanic. And it can roll 4 mods that can roll on Charms. Charms is one of the other Ascendancies. They can socket in 3 of these items that are basically like jewels, and they take certain powers from certain Ascendancies and kind of combine them, yada yada yada. But 4 of those mods can roll randomly on one of these jewels, and some of them are very strong for our build as well. The only really good mod here that I have is Totems taunt enemies around them for 2 seconds. This is very noticeable, because this is not like Old Mastery. The Old Mastery that taunted enemies for 1 second was very small in radius, kind of like round about this. But the ability this is based off of is from the Chieftain, from the new Chieftain Ascendancy. And that one has like 50 to 60 radius, which we're talking about like this. So if you get that, you will definitely feel it, and you should think about getting something like that. It is very, very strong. Other things you can get is chance to summon an additional totem whenever you place a totem, which is basically like this effect. It rolls from 30 to 50% though, and it is additive with this. So you can get up to 80% in total with that. Very, very cozy, especially while mapping, and replacing your totems is a lot easier. Strength and int is just really convenient and nice to have. You can get something like Wither effect on top. You can get Onslaught effect. Really whatever. I just think it is a very nice jewel. So just scout them. Maybe you find something that you like. Some of them are very expensive though, just to make sure you understand. This jewel is still the same from last week. And then we have Rain of Splinters. I actually bought this one because I dropped another one of these jewels from one of the bosses and I sold it for 3 divines. And then in total, I bought this one for 6. And this was basically my last upgrade right now today before I made this video. And it should be yours as well. It is strong, but don't get me wrong, it is not something you should get over any of the other upgrades that I talk about in the damage section. This is something you buy once you have your setup ready. But once you have that, oh boy, is it strong. If you don't know how to get this one, you can try to corrupt Crimson Jewels if you really want to. You have a tiny chance on corruption with Vault Orbs, any rare Crimson Jewel, to get Rain of Splinters, but it is, I mean, literally tiny. You're probably never going to see it. And that is kind of all the changes right here. Oh, I guess I forgot that I also got the last points on my Magi. So Nature's Concoction here. This one is very nice. A lot of people have been asking, does this work with totems? It doesn't, but you still have Frenzy up, right? Or Mana Forge Frenzy or whatever. And that still triggers it. So you get the bonus. You get the 30% increased effect with a weapon recently. And then this one, Detect Evil, we're not using Bark Skin. It's not very good in our build. We don't have any armor. So you can either take 2 small nodes here to get extra juice from the League mechanic, or you can take Detect Evil. The first line does nothing for us. We're not marking enemies. But the second one is actually kind of sweet. It basically means that there is going to be these mini-map icons for rares and uniques and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. As for my passive tree, I will share this one once I'm ready. You can also go to my stream and type in !Atlas. It's also linked in there. But in general, it's not really anything refined yet. I basically just before making this video completed everything, and now I have all my passive points. So we're kind of going to see what I'm going to do with it. Currently, I'm very much leaning towards Expedition and Legion, and that is how I made most of my money, which is also why Scourge Arrow of the Menace is so much better than Caustic Arrow on that, particularly because the whole screen is full of arrows. You can actually AoE clear really well. But yeah, other than that, we'll have to see. I'll give you one more update after the next 2 days. If there's anything else to talk about, I'll probably have 1 or 2 more upgrades in store. We're also, in the next update, going to talk about end games, so stuff like Simplex Amulets or Micro Distillery Belts. Plus, once I have anything even close to being refined for the strat to share with you guys, I will also do that in another video. But yeah, with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.